Skyy Moore's been fantastic in camp. He had that hip pointer, whatever it was, came back the next day, still looked really good. The Western Michigan product, man, when he got drafted, he was one of my draft crushes and many people's draft crushes. But I was like, man, year one, Andy Reid offense, wide receiver coming from a relatively small school, small conference. I just don't see him having a big impact in year one. And here in training camp, he looks polished, man, from the clips I've seen. Tucker, you've been out there for every snap of it pretty much. What do you think about Skyy Moore?
Well, what I really like about Sky, I think jumps off the tape when you watch him, and not necessarily if you're watching film, if you're just out there at camp. What really jumps out to me is his route running ability, his ability to shake defenders. Now, granted, the first video clip that was tweeted out from KC Sports Network on Twitter at KC Sports Network, um, he was on DeAndre Baker, and DeAndre Baker is no longer with the team. So that might play into it a little bit, but I think his hips are very loose. He's a very fluid route runner. He can go catch any ball that's put in his area, which is impressive for a dude who he might be 6 foot. I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't think he's there. I don't think he's at 6 foot. So he's not a very tall guy in stature, but he's thick, for lack of a better term. I think Matty Lane calls him a thigh back because you got wide back for Debo Samuel. He's the thigh back because those thighs, and once you see him in person, they're no joke. The dude doesn't skip leg day. So I think that's what I've been really impressed with is his ability to run routes, his ability to lose people in space and get open. He seems like he's always open, too. That's another thing. And a guy who can get open for Patrick Mahomes, number one, and haul in anything that gets put near him is dangerous for any team in the NFL. So it's really exciting to see him kind of blossom into the role that he's been put in. Because Jordan, as you mentioned, it's tough for wide receivers in this Andy Reid system to kind of grasp on to wide receivers, the wide receiver role, because they run concepts. They don't run specific routes. It's all concepts, and it's kind of a lot of adjusting on the fly, knowing what Patrick likes and what Patrick needs in certain situations. And Sky's been able to do that. And I think one of the big things that really helped Sky is he went down to Dallas with Patrick, and he worked out with Patrick in the offseason. And that's huge. And I think building that chemistry was really big from the beginning. And I always go back. You talked about him being a draft crush. He was a very good player at Western Michigan his senior season. He kind of propelled him into that status of a high end draft pick. And it's fun because we were doing a lot of mock drafts at KCS and mocking guys. We did a realistic mock draft. Realistically, we mocked Skyy Moore in the first round of the Kansas City Chiefs because we said, okay, yeah, like we would be happy if the Chiefs selected Skyy Moore in the first round. And the Chiefs selected him in the second round. So it's like an even better value pick. I really like where they got him. We could devolve this podcast into the draft of the Brett Veach's draft from last season, but we don't have to. I think that it was a very good draft, a very good pick, very good value. So it's good to see that the early returns. Right, they haven't even played a game yet. They're not even going to play a game until Saturday the 13th. But seeing him right now, I don't think he's going to play very much during that first preseason game because they want to kind of keep him healthy for the season, but they want to see him in action. So Sky's been very impressive this camp, just from his physical makeup to what he's been able to do on the field. Nothing but good things have come about from Skyy.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And with any young wide receiver, it's going to be tough to learn any playbook in the NFL, get involved in any offense, get involved in jumping up a depth chart, anything like that. But like an Andy Reid offense with a Patrick Mahomes at quarterback and like not a rebuilding team, Super Bowl expectations, all that good stuff. If any player was going to kind of adjust to it well, though, it was going to be Skyy Moore. Like he doesn't have the crazy size or anything, but he's well built considering his frame or his height or whatever you want to call it. He's a really solid athlete. He's very smooth. He doesn't have absolute track star speed, but he can get going in a hurry. He can get past plenty of people. He's also very smart and he can run. He's going to be, I don't want to say like a slant merchant early on in his NFL career, but like he's a guy that he will be able to find ways to get open. And that's very difficult for rookies to do. He also probably won't see a lot of one-on-one coverage. He's not going to be like the most featured centerpiece in the Chiefs offense. And obviously, if they still had Tyreek Hill, he definitely wouldn't be. But Travis Kelce is going to be up there. Juju Smith-Schuster is going to be up there. McCall Hardman's going to be up there. He's going to find ways to get his, and it's going to be a little bit easier playing in that offense. So to challenge it first, once you get the hang of it, I think it's going to be really nice. And with that in mind, The rest of the wide receiver position behind Moore, Smith Schuster, Hardman, and MVS, still kind of iffy, man. I know that like Justin Watson might have an inside track because of the special teams ability. Doris Fountain does as well. Josh Gordon hasn't really shown much. Cornell Powell, still a relative unknown. Justin Ross is on the IR. Connor and I talked about it last week, and I think we both had Watson making it. I had Gordon making it just by a weird gut feeling. If I'm calling the shots, I'm not keeping him on the team. Tucker, what do you think the Chiefs are going to end up doing there?
Man, the Josh Gordon saga has been really interesting for the Kansas City Chiefs. Because he hasn't. I don't want to word this. I don't think he's played particularly well this training
Yeah,
camp. Not saying that he's been bad, but it hasn't been to the performance that you would expect Josh Gordon to put on. If that makes sense. To be fair to him, like Skyy Moore, I think is outperforming Josh Gordon, and you might not necessarily expect that. Just because of Gordon's size, and you can really see that when you get out at St. Joe. His size is definitely a real thing. He's dropping a lot of balls now. You know, as we're recording this, he had a touchdown catch. It was a big deep ball from Mahomes, so he's getting back into it. But kind of early on in practice, it was a little bit slower of a start. And you're right. I mean, to keep a veteran guy like Josh Gordon wouldn't surprise me on that roster. Now, to keep a guy like Justin Watson, a guy who can play special teams, that definitely doesn't surprise me. Because Dave Tobe has a lot of control over this roster. There's going to be 5 or 6 guys on this team that are basically special teamers only. And it might come at the sacrifice of the wide receiver position. But I think that's kind of the conversation of like wide receiver 5 or 6. We'll see, because the running back position, which we'll get to later, but is going to be so crowded as well. So I think one of those things too is the performances we've seen from Sky have elevated that level, and there's a bit of a gap, right? So it's like Skyy Moore, Juju Smith-Schuster, MVS has played well. McCole Hardman has really been playing well too. I mean, that's 4 guys right there. Then it's like, okay, who's next? Necessarily, do you need a who's next? Like if you're going on, not really. I think that those 4 guys bring enough versatility to your receiving room that you're not hurting for somebody to be a number 5 option, especially when you have Travis Kelce on the field at the same time. I think you're fine, but I think it's one of those situations where Justin Watson has made some good plays on the offensive side of the ball. If he continues to make good plays on the offensive side of the ball, if he continues to play special teams, I think he's almost a shoo-in for wide receiver 5. Do they keep 6? I don't know. With the way the running back room shaping out, I don't know how it's going to end up. But yeah, I do think that there is a big conversation about that. They just signed Jordan. You'll have to remind me of his name again. They signed another wide receiver.
Devin Gray.
That's right, Devin Gray. Which I don't anticipate. I should say I don't anticipate him to compete for a starting spot, let alone a spot on the roster. I think he's more of a camp body, training camp, or practice squad type guy. But it is a really interesting group, especially after losing Tyreek Hill, who's been a staple in that room. It almost feels like there's more excitement around the wide receivers than there has been in years past, just because you don't know what's going to happen. You can't say F it, Tyreek's down there somewhere. You can say F it, Juju's down there somewhere, because that's usually what it's going to be. And, McCole has looked really well. They've been moving McCole and Juju all around, and Skyy Moore as well, doing all different kinds of plays. So, yeah, man, I think that it's going to be really interesting to see who makes the roster as that last wide receiver. But for me, I'm probably going to put my money on Justin Watson just because of the team's ability.